So let us begin our eighth session of the Science of Yoga lecture series that is organized by IIT Roorkee. And I welcome all who are here and as well as in YouTube. And as always, we begin our session with the invocation video, which I request Shruti to play. Hopefully the audio will not be there with the video at least. Let us see.
श्री आदिनाथाय नमोऽस्तु तस्मै येनोपदिष्टा हठयोगविद्या विभ्राजते प्रोन्नतराजयोगम् आरोढुमिच्छोरधिरोहणीव योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचा मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोक्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि अथ पातञ्जलयोगसारसूत्राणि अथ योगानुशासनम् योगश्चित्तवृत्तिनिरोधः तदा द्रष्टुः स्वरूपेऽवस्थानम् अभ्यासवैराग्याभ्यामतन्निरोधः यमनियमासनप्राणायामप्रत्याहारधारणा ध्यानसमाधयोऽष्टवङ्गानि त्रयमेकत्र संयमः पुरुषार्थशून्यानां गुणानां प्रतिप्रसवः कैवल्यं स्वरूपप्रतिष्ठा वा चितिशक्तिरिति।
I again welcome one and all to our session. And today's session, we specifically circulated this with a new student. So we have a fresh batch of UT students with whom we also circulated the link of this session because today we have Dr. Rahul Sinha with us, who himself like researches and as well as with the yoga interventions in therapy. So he has done his research and as well as yoga interventions in his therapeutic works. So we think from the IIT Roorkee side that this session will be specifically beneficial for our new students to understand how yoga can help them to maintain their health, physical as well as mental, while going through their journey of life in this IIT, in the IIT Roorkee, as well as in their greater life. So Dr. Rahul specifically asked me not to introduce him, so he would like to do that for himself. So I like pass it on to Dr. Rahul, so he may start the session, and all over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Soham. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
And I hope you can see my slides as well in the slideshow view.
Yes, it is all. It is visible.
Okay, perfect. So then let me start. Is that fine? Can I start?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so namaste, all of you. And I'll start just by saying Gurubhyo Namo Namaha, because of all the rishis and giants we are in the field of knowledge generation that we are here today, and it's really a privilege to be doing this presentation today. Um, I specifically requested Dr. Soham that I'll introduce myself because you would also would like to know that who am I and then how it connects to today's topic, which is basically can yoga-based interventions improve health. So what I'm going to do over next 45 minutes or so is that I'll first introduce myself, and then my presentation is going to be in two parts, which I'll talk about. So let me begin by introducing myself. And my email address is on my first slide. So in case you wish to contact me later on, please do so. I'll be more than happy to be in touch with any one of you who is interested in this field and would like to kind of discuss, argue, or fight with me anytime in future over the email. So let's say who am I and who am I not? So first of all, let me begin with who am I. During my school days, one of the strongest aspirations I had was to serve the community or to do samaj seva, as we say in most of the Indian languages. Now, I do understand that it was quite romantic. It was more of a romanticism and idealism of a teenager, which fortunately or unfortunately lasted over the next few decades, and it has not really faded away till now. So during those days, I felt that if I have to kind of serve the community based on my inclinations, based on my interests, I thought either I should either be an engineer or a doctor. But in the end, when it came to choosing between these two fields, I thought health field was probably a better option. Studying medicine will help me to reach out to community in a better way, and that's the reason why I decided to choose medical field over engineering field. And I ended up in a medical school, and for next 5 years I did my graduation in medicine. That is, I completed my MBBS degree, and that's how I became a health professional. So I became a health professional by completing my MBBS. During the MBBS days, I was not really very happy the way most of the education, medical education focused on the way medicine was done. And I thought it was really trying to look at human body as a machine, and it was very, very mechanistic and reductionist in its view. And I mean, my inclination was towards a serving community. So community medicine was a very natural choice for me to go for a postgraduate degree. But again, a few of my mentors suggested that I better do a clinical degree. I study some clinical medicine, and then I get into the community medicine because that will be helpful and it will be good for me on both counts. So I was looking for a branch of medicine, a branch of medical field, which was not really reductionistic. And then I zeroed in on psychiatry. I thought that psychiatry was probably that branch which was looking at human beings in their entirety. And I was later on, it didn't turn out to be fully correct, but anyway, that's a different topic altogether. But I thought that because psychiatry was kind of looking at health in a broader perspective, I decided to join psychiatry, and I completed my postgraduate degree in psychiatry, that is MD in psychiatry, and thus I entered the field of mental health. So I'm basically a mental health professional by my training. And as I mentioned right from the beginning, that going back to the community was always something which I had aspired for. And at that point, I felt that if I got into public mental health, instead of clinical psychiatry. So again, I had two options: either to do clinical practice, that is one-on-one practice and therapy, or I kind of look at problems at a population level, at mass level, and then try to kind of find the problems at population level, try to find the solutions for them, and work on them. And thus, I ended up in public mental health or global mental health, so as to say. I have a master's in public health from a US university, and I have also a PhD in implementation science and public mental health. And for close to uh, a decade and a half, almost 15 years, I worked in the field of global mental health. So I was part of many global research consortiums, and I my what the nature of my work was that how to translate evidence-based interventions at population level, how to kind of ensure that what we know works, how to translate that into something which is at mass level or kind of how to reach out to people who have mental health conditions and how to provide them with services. That was my area of work. But again, at that point of time, around 5 years ago, I realized that most of the evidence base or most of the interventions which we deal with in field of public mental health or global mental health are either drug-based pharmacological interventions, or they are based on psychological interventions which are extremely Eurocentric, or I mean, they have a uh, they are basically from a culture which is not really an Indian culture, and personally, there's no major problem with that. But I thought it will be good for me to also look at interventions which are culturally rooted in Indian thought, and that's how I decided to kind of take a break from my global mental health work. I'm still doing it. It's not a full break. I'm partly or quite some amount of time is spent in global mental health work, but I have primarily moved on to something which we now call as Indian knowledge systems. So taking kind of, I mean, I shifted my base from psychological interventions rooted in Eurocentric thought into interventions which could be called as no, interventions which are based in Indian knowledge system. And that's how I shifted into Indian knowledge system based public mental health work. So this is what I am. Um, who am I not? So I must really give this disclaimer that I'm not someone who has studied Indian knowledge system systematically or in a structured way. I have not studied any of the Shastras uh, formally, although for last 10 years on personal front, I have kind of spent a lot of time understanding what we may call as Karma Yoga Shastra, and we can talk about it later. But I have not studied Yoga Shastra formally. Most of the speakers which you heard in this series, I think 7 speakers you have heard in this series, and there were some of them were luminary, like extremely successful researchers and practitioners in this field. I don't think I even deserve to be in this panel. So I must say that the original invitation was to Professor Anand Paranspe, whom we can pretty much call as father of Indian psychology. And I'll share a few things about Professor Paranspe later on in the presentation. But he was very generous enough to pass on that invitation to me. He proposed my name, and Dr. Soham and the committee, Indian Knowledge System Committee at IIT Roorkee, very graciously and generously agreed to have me in this particular series. So I thank Professor Anand Paranspe, Dr. Soham Chakravarti, and IKS Committee at IIT Roorkee for giving me this chance to present my thoughts today. So with that background, I must say that what I'm going to present today, some of you may agree, some of you may disagree, and I'm perfectly fine with that, and happy to have discussions later on or after this talk as well. So what I'm going to do today is going to do a presentation in 2 parts. So the first part is about science of yoga, and the second part is on science and yoga. And these are, I think, 2 different perspectives, 2 different worldviews. Just the use of preposition kind of changes the whole thing. I'll explain that as we go along. So let me start my formal presentation now. So today we are going to talk about science of yoga. And for that, I thought it's good for us to first remind ourselves what exactly science is. And I'm sure students who have recently joined IIT Roorkee, maybe this is their first week, I'm sure they must be very well versed with all these things. So excuse me if I'm slightly off the track, but I decided to kind of pull this definition of science from sciencecouncil.org. Science Council is a UK organization established by Royal Charter. So probably this is the best place to see what and how they define science as. So basically, science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world, following a systematic methodology based on evidence. So some of the critical things in this definition are that there has to be an experiment or an observation as benchmark for testing hypothesis. So basically, it starts with a hypothesis, and then you collect data or do an experiment or do observations to either refute that hypothesis or you fail to refute that hypothesis. It's based on, induction is one of the central themes. So it's reasoning to establish general rules or conclusions drawn from facts or examples. So you have data, you have facts, and based on that, you kind of establish general rules. What we call science has to be, there has to be, it it should be verifiable, it should be repeatable. So if someone else wants to do the same experiment, one should be able to do that and more or less arrive at similar results. Results could be different, but at least the methodology can be repeated and to be verified. Critical analysis can be applied to it, and one can test it. It can be subject to peer review. And most importantly, I have not put that in here because it's not part of the definition of the sciencecouncil.org, but falsification or falsifiability is something which is very central to science. So whatever we say today can be falsified with new data, with new experiments, with new observations, with new theories. So falsification is the, so there's nothing like you have to believe this particular thing. It can always be kind of refuted and something new can come in. Now, when we talk of science and science of yoga, that means there is some kind of a relationship between these two constructs. So we need to, now we have this kind of a, when we say that we have to talk about science, then we have this sort of a limitation or a constraint to kind of use these principles or the scientific principles on yoga, and then we need to define yoga in a certain way that we can apply these scientific principles to it. So the way this is defined is as follows. So my definition of yoga for this first part is that it is a multi-component practice. Yoga is a multi-component practice that includes postures, movements, sequences, breathing techniques, deep relaxation practices, and meditation. And this can be pretty much called as modern postural yoga. Some of you who attended Professor Edwin Bryant's lecture, he talked about modern postural yoga, and I specifically use modern postural yoga as, in this first part of presentation. So when I say science of yoga, I'm applying principles of science, which are all that: induction, repetition, critical analysis, experimentation, observation, and I'm applying it to modern postural yoga or to and again, this is not what I have done. I'm doing this for the first time. This is what is being done, and that's the reason why I'm defining yoga in this particular way. So modern postural yoga, and what happens when we apply scientific principles to it, what we get. So then it should help us to answer the question, can yoga improve health? So when I say can yoga improve health, I mean yoga as in modern postural yoga. And then do we have evidence or do we have studies to kind of say that, yes, it is helpful? So in this slide and the next slide, I'm sure you're watching the slide which I'm on, that is slide number 4. So on this slide and the next slide, I'm going to kind of present a very high level overview of the studies which are related to yoga based interventions. So we can very well call them as yoga based interventions. So there are principles of hatha yoga, and then again, modern postural yoga is something which is developed over last 100 years, since 1920s. And there are multiple sources where you can refer to how these practices are developed. So what we study as science, or what researchers, yoga researchers do, is that they take some form of modern postural yoga. Now, it's not like just one uniform homogeneous type. Some forms of modern postural yoga have more of meditation. Some have more of particular postures, restorative yoga. There could be vinyasa yoga. There could be Ashtanga yoga. There are different types, even there are different types of modern postural yoga. And when you apply scientific principles or a framework of science to them, what do you get? So one of the questions was that can yoga, one of the participant questions was about can we heal mental disorders? So I'll come to that heal term later on. But in very simple terms, can we say that can yoga improve health? So then let's look at mental health first, and then on the third slide, we will have some other health conditions. So let's say if we take the condition depression. So this systematic, so there's a meta-analysis published 3 years ago in 2020, and they were able to kind of find, I think, 19 studies, and total number of participants in the meta-analysis were 632, and they included only the randomized control trials with yoga intervention comprising more than 50% physical activity in adults with a diagnosed mental disorder. So they were looking at depressive symptoms and not major depression as a particular condition. So they were looking at depressive symptoms in depression, in anxiety disorders, in schizophrenia, in post-traumatic stress disorder, in a range of mental health conditions. And what they found was that yoga versus treatment as usual, which is basically no treatment many a times, or it could be a waitlisted controls. They found that yoga was superior, and there was a standardized mean difference of 0.41. Now that means that yoga had uh, quite a moderate effect on the outcome of depression. So depression is also defined. Depression is defined based on certain criteria. There are scales to kind of measure depression. And when we say that yoga had impact on depression, what we basically mean is that people who did yoga or practiced yoga, their depression scores went down. And for those who did not, their depression either remained same or did not improve much, and that difference was 0.41. Now, standardized mean difference, these are all very statistically loaded terms, commonly used in the research field. I don't think I have time to kind of explain all that. Happy to take questions though. But it basically means that there is good enough amount of evidence. There are 19 randomized control trials. Now, randomized control trial is a gold standard used in the field of evidence-based medicine. So 19 is not a small amount, although total number of participants included in meta-analysis is only 632, and it could be more. But let us say this is the field is developing. So we have got one meta-analysis saying that there is a effect of 0.41. Then for anxiety disorders, systematic review by Holger Kramer and his group. Now, Holger Kramer is someone who has published multiple systematic reviews over last 10, 12 years. So if you want, you can always go back and look at the research published by their group. They also had meta-analysis with 8 studies, systematic review and meta-analysis, and they looked at effect of yoga on anxiety disorders or elevated levels of anxiety. And what they found was that again, yoga versus treatment as usual, the standardized mean difference was 0.43. And don't worry about the negative or positive sign. It's just um, based on the comparator arm, it changes. But yoga was quite superior compared to treatment as usual. And very interestingly, it was superior to active control. Active control could be exercise or could be any other intervention. The details are in their analysis. If you want to refer to these papers, I have given a PMID number. There was no enough space, so I have not included the entire citation, but you can use this PMID number in any internet browser. If you just put this PMID and that number, the paper will pop up. So don't worry about where to find all these things. It's all available, open access on internet. Again, a very recent systematic review. It was only a systematic review, no quantitative synthesis or meta-analysis. But I was really surprised to find a systematic review for yoga-based interventions in substance use disorders, and 8 studies were there. And almost all of the studies found that the primary outcomes related to substance use, pain, and anxiety had improved. So these are some of the priority mental disorders as defined by the World Health Organization. And we now have good enough evidence to suggest that yoga-based interventions improve mental health. Moving on to the next slide. Yes. Now, perinatal mental health is my area of work as well, and I'm going to very quickly present what I do as part of my day job or my research work. So, perinatal mental health is mental health problems such as depression or anxiety, which pregnant women face either during pregnancy or immediately after pregnancy. And this is a very, very important public health problem. And yoga based interventions are probably, I mean, the research on this particular thing is probably maximum in the field of perinatal mental health. And last year, Corrigan and her colleagues had published this review. Again, this was a meta-analysis, 29 studies, total participants 2,217. So quite a good study. And again, what they found was that the standardized mean difference for anxiety, depression, and stress, all very good effect sizes, basically suggesting that yoga is far better. Yoga based intervention is better, or fares, I mean, it improves all these symptoms of anxiety, depression, and stress compared to either. It's not wait listed control in pregnancy because there is very little time, so it has to be treatment as usual. They also found that the duration of labor reduced by 117 minutes, I suppose. And normal, the probability or the chances of normal vaginal birth increased. The odds ratio is 2.58. So all extremely significant results, a very solid systematic review, and very supportive of the fact that yoga-based interventions could be extremely helpful for women during pregnancy, not just with those having depression and anxiety, but even for pregnant women who do not have mental health conditions. And then finally, I'll also kind of talk about adolescent mental health. So there was a question that whether adolescents um, uh, can be benefited by yoga-based interventions. And again, this systematic review included 39 studies by Miller and her group. 39 studies is a huge number, and what they found was that in children and youth between 5 and 18, there were positive effects on a range of outcomes in psychological, behavioral, cognitive, and physiological functioning. So basically, what happens is that the social, emotional learning, or some of the important outcomes during the student age improve if children in this age group 15, 5 to 18 practice yoga, or at least in the research settings. Now, let me kind of quickly say a few things about what these two slides mean. When I decided to kind of start get into this area of Indian knowledge system and its application to mental health, public mental health in 2018, I was probably of the opinion that no one is studying this, no one is researching this, and I'm a researcher, I'm a full-time researcher for last I think 20 years, 15 years, and I was still not aware of this field, because if it's not your field, then you don't read up much about that particular field. So my ignorance led me to to some kind of fear that if I start getting into the yoga field, probably there's nothing, and then how am I going to sustain and what kind of work I'll be able to do. But then, to my utter surprise, I started kind of finding these kind of studies. And if you visit the website of Yoga Alliance website, they have a list of 500 plus randomized controlled trials done on yoga and various health conditions. So there is enormous amount of evidence base, and these five systematic reviews and meta-analysis which I just talked about is an ample evidence that a lot is being done across the globe. Most of the studies are being done in India, in the US, in the UK, and Australia. And there are many research groups in South America also, who are slowly getting into this research work. Iran is another. Pakistan. There are many places where the yoga based intervention research is in full place, and in last 5 to 7 years or last decade, there is just a huge proliferation of all these studies. Cautionary note is that most of these studies are still of small size. The sample sizes are small, so the kind of inference you can derive from them is limited, and the qualities are of low. The quality of these studies is low to medium. But that's because yoga is not something which is actively funded by agencies, the donor agencies. Although again things are changing, we have now fantastic Satyam division who has supported my work as well as work of other researchers in India. So Department of Science and Technology has a dedicated division, Science and Technology of Yoga and Meditation, and they do fund research studies in yoga field. NIH, which is a United States donor agency, NIHR, they're all very positive. I mean, no one really kind of has any negative sort of attitude towards funding yoga research. So this is a hugely upcoming field. And for engineers also, there are a lot of things which they can do actually. And if there is chance, I can talk about it slightly later. But in the interest of time, I'll just move forward and would like to kind of move on to the next slide. And this is to kind of keep it less wordy with less text and to make it slightly interesting. I have replaced all the technical scientific jargon with some pictures, just but to kind of let you know that there are areas where again yoga research is really at the forefront. Low back pain is one of the most burdens, one of the most difficult conditions which affects most of the people because of our posture, sedentary lifestyle, and it's really high up there, first or second. I think the first cause of morbidity in the disability adjusted life years kind of a thing. So low back pain is a very common condition, and if it is not due to any structural problems related to intervertebral disc or vertebrae, most of the times it is due to the bad posture or stress and things like that. And there is a very solid evidence of yoga based interventions improving low back pain. So you also must have heard of a lot of people who have said that, oh, I was advised surgery, but then I did this yoga thing and then it got better. So that's a very commonplace knowledge now that evidence for yoga helping low back pain is really huge. Then metabolic syndrome, diabetes. This is like the modern epidemic, diabetes, hypertension, and all those things associated with metabolic syndrome. There are multiple studies which are multiple studies which have included yoga-based interventions to improve diabetes outcomes, to improve outcomes of hypertension. So this is also a very huge field. Yoga for elderly, NIH US has a kind of a they have this elderly yoga program, and they are very kind of the evidence on yoga for elderly is building up. Yoga helps in improving the overall well-being, balance, and other physical parameters of people above 60 years of age. And actually, it is extremely safe. So there are a lot of good randomized controlled trials in this area. I'm also supported by NIH and with another collaborator in India. We're working on developing a yoga-based intervention for elderly. It is pretty much in the preliminary phases, but yes, there is a lot of demand for this. Cardiac rehabilitation. So many people have myocardial infarction, and then post myocardial infarction, what we do is a cardiac rehabilitation program. You would be surprised to know that in India, the organization which I worked earlier, Public Health Foundation of India, it implemented a huge trial. I mean, this was a yoga care trial. So they used yoga-based intervention for cardiac rehabilitation, yoga care. And yoga care trial, they had 1,000 plus participants in each arm. One arm receiving yoga-based care and another arm receiving control usual care. And again, they found that although the final outcome of myocardial infarction and the primary outcome, although there was no change, but the quality of life and getting back to kind of life and improve other outcomes had significantly improved. And I was not surprised with the primary outcome of major myocardial infarction or other things, because cardiac rehabilitation is a very difficult area. There are practically no interventions which improve the primary outcome in that area. But this was a trial with 1,000 plus participants, which was for more than 5 years or so. Huge trial, fantastic trial, which looked at role of yoga for cardiac rehabilitation. Then in cancer treatment and cancer survivors, post-treatment, yoga is playing a huge role. There are lots and lots of studies, mostly from the US, which look into use of yoga-based interventions for improving. And it is again not a primary treatment, as an adjunct to chemotherapy and post-surgical intervention and adjunct to radiotherapy. So cancer is again an area where yoga-based interventions are usually used. And finally, there was also what you see on this in this picture is these are all cells related to our immune function. So there's a review, a systematic review by Falkenberg and colleagues, which have looked at impact of yoga-based interventions on inflammatory markers, pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory markers, and again the results are quite promising. And there's a systematic review, so there are large number of studies which have looked at whether yoga helps in immunity and improving immune function. And if you're interested in any of these, please you can refer to this particular book, The Principles and Practice of Yoga in Healthcare, by Satbir Singh Khalsa, Lawrence Koheno, Timothy McCall, and Shirley Tellis. All of these are really the giants in this field who have worked in the area of yoga-based interventions, research, and therapy for more than 4 decades. You can buy even this book. I mean, this is it's a huge volume, more than 500 pages, but they very systematically tease out each and every condition and how yoga based interventions are faring up in terms of all these health conditions. uh, so this is all about evidence base for yoga. um, I think what is important for us to know is how yoga improves health. So, Dr. Soham, I think he had proposed me the question that will you be able to provide a model, kind of a logic model, that how yoga basically improves health? Because we need to understand. I mean, otherwise it's like a black box. You do something and something happens, but then how? So, what's the mechanism? And this model is developed by Dr. Satbir Singh Khalsa, who is one of the authors of that book which I mentioned. And I'll just present the model and kind of explain it very quickly. So again, just to remind all of us, when we are in this area of science of yoga, we define yoga as a multi-component practice which comprises of postures, breathing, relaxation, meditation in varying amounts, in varying degrees, and this is what we call yoga. And what it does, it essentially improves the global human functionality. It improves the human functioning. It has a good effect on physical and mental health, on physical performance, that is fitness, and how you kind of basically the way your muscle system works. It helps in stress and emotional regulation. It helps in awareness, mindfulness, metacognition, positive behavior. So positive behavior or lifestyle changes is something which is now critical for almost all of us, not just the students who have entered the college, but probably every person now needs to really understand how to eat, what to eat, when to sleep, how to sleep, and so on. I mean, lots of lifestyle related things, then well-being, values, life purpose, and meaning, and spirituality. So all that what I mentioned over here can be defined, can be measured. So this is not, again, these are none of these are constructs which cannot be measured. For example, well-being. Now, well-being also has there are scales for measuring well-being, and they are used pretty much. Quality of life is a construct which can be measured. Spirituality is also measured. Awareness is measured. There are scales to measure awareness and mindfulness. So in this particular reel, we have everything which is measurable, and we can see whether yoga has impact on those measures or not in a very objective, quantifiable manner. Now, how does it have an impact? So one of the ways is through improving the fitness. So it improves the flexibility of your muscles, it improves the strength, coordination, it improves respiratory functions, and improves self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is your basically what you say as confidence. You know, you feel confident that you can do something. So self-efficacy is that kind of a thing. When we say of fitness, there is a very important mechanism through which also yoga-based postures help, and that is through stretching. So what stretching does is that it works on your fascia. Fascia is that connective tissue which binds muscles and everything together. And there's a huge role of stretching and how stretching helps in tissue repair and reducing inflammation. And again, a huge body of work around that. So this is something which most of us know, that this is how maybe yogasanas work. The second important aspect, which again many of us may not be aware of, is through awareness. So yoga improves our awareness, it improves attention. And how it improves attention is all these meditative practices, or the way you perform asana and pranayam. It has to do something with your brain circuitry. And there are certain circuits, there are certain circuits which are called as default mode network. That is like a default circuit. And in that default circuit, you basically ruminate, keep on ruminating about the same things, keep on thinking about the same problems, or your mind is wandering, you're not able to focus your attention. Through these contemplative practices or through yoga practices, you are able to activate another set of cortico-basal ganglia thalamic circuits, which help in activating certain areas of your frontal lobe, which reduces mind wandering, which reduces rumination, and which help you to provide more attention. You become more mindful. You improve your concentration. You also improve your abilities to kind of think and logically think and connect things, and basically the cognitive functions and metacognitive functions. So metacognition is cognition of cognition. So what you are thinking, you are aware of what you are thinking and how you are thinking, or your thinking patterns. Now, if you are aware, it also helps you to regulate that. You cannot regulate something which you are not aware of. So to regulate something, you have to know that it happens in first place. So basically, all these practices rooted in yoga help you to first become aware, and then through awareness, you are able to regulate your stress, you are able to regulate your emotions. It builds your resilience, it builds equanimity and self-efficacy. Again, let me remind you that most of these things, we have psychological tools or scales to measure them. So we are not talking something uh, which is kind of abstract. And it also helps in improving unitive states, transcendence, flow, transformation. So flow, transformation, purpose, these are some of the concepts used in positive psychology. And again, they do have tools to kind of define them and measure them. And basically, this is all very interlinked. So this is kind of a logic model proposed by Satbir Singh Khalsa, and it's available in some of their publications. But when I asked him whether we have objective evidence for the entire model, so it's not there yet. As researchers, we are all working and picking up some areas and taking baby steps to work on certain things. So as part of my work, I'm working on certain things in this particular pathway, not all of them. And that is what I'll talk to you about in next couple of slides. So this is the logic model. This is how modern postural yoga improves health or global human functionality. Now, in next 2 to 3 minutes, I'll talk about the research work which I'm currently doing. So it is a yoga based lifestyle intervention for antenatal depression, and this is supported by Department of Biotechnology and Wellcome Trust India Alliance. So this is a career fellowship awarded to me for 5 years, and I'm currently in the second year. The second year is finishing now in about 2 weeks from now. So I'm working on depression during pregnancy, and why I'm choosing depression and why it needs to be based on yoga is something which I've put it on this slide, but I'll skip in the interest of time. So what we will do is that we will have integrated approach to yoga therapy as intervention. Now, integrated approach to yoga therapy is an intervention which is developed by S. Vyasa group. S. Vyasa is Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Kendra, and they are based in Bangalore. And most of you must be aware of their work. And they have done phenomenal work in the field of yoga research. They have hundreds of papers published in this particular field, not just yoga and healthcare, but yoga and its application in management, in psychology, in other fields as well. So I have not designed a new yoga-based interventions. What I'm doing is I'm taking their yoga-based intervention, which essentially comprises of asanas for 15 minutes, pranayam for 20 minutes, relaxation, and a few things related to yoga philosophy. So I'll take that intervention and I'll kind of adapt it for the setting where I'm working. Now that is very important because I'm working in a rural setting. Now this is a setting where most of the women get pregnant when they are 18 or 19 or 20 at the most. Very less educated. They they hardly know about yoga. They hardly know about many things in life. So for them, I mean, this is so very different from urban setting where probably now the pregnant women are so keen to practice yoga. Now, in my setting, that's not the case. So I need to adapt that particular intervention for my setting. And currently, I'm doing my formative research where I'm trying to see what are the things which will so we need to first understand what is the attitude of pregnant women towards yoga, whether they know yoga, what kind of belief system they have about yoga, whether they fear about yoga. It's a huge amount of exciting work, which I'll have to skip now in interest of time, but I'm happy to kind of discuss that later. So I'm currently doing this adaptation, and once this adaptation will be over, I'll undertake an individual randomized parallel group placebo controlled trial. So basically, a gold standard randomized controlled trial to assess the efficacy. And my hypothesis is that women with antenatal depression who practice that particular intervention for 12 weeks will have greater reduction in depression symptoms compared to women with antenatal depression who receive usual care or enhanced usual care. So in control group, we are going to give them some information and lifestyle advice and so on and so forth. So it's not just no treatment, but it is enhanced usual care. And these are some of the aspects of my trial design. What I would like to say is that if I'm able to successfully complete this trial, then it will be probably I mean, it will be the biggest trial in the field of perinatal mental health in India, to be sure, if that sample size is reached. Um, and there are very few trials who have kind of across the world who have recruited so many people. This will be the biggest trial in the field of yoga for pregnancy. Uh, the biggest trial till now is around 100 pregnant women sample size. So let's see, this is quite ambitious, and we are trying to apply all the rigorous scientific principles and rigorous methodology of RCTs to a mental health condition, particularly affecting pregnant women. Now, why this study is important is because this is the first explanatory RCT to evaluate a yoga-based intervention for rural population. So most of the studies in India are in the urban population. There's hardly anything for rural population, and this is one of the very first rigorous RCTs in the rural area. Our emphasis will be on self-care and home-based practice to ensure the sustainability and scalability over a long period of time. We will also do a return on investment analysis. So basically, economic evaluation is integrated in this trial, and it has a potential. There is a potential to integrate this in the public health system through Ayushman Bharat. So there is a scope for scalability and things like that. Ayushman Bharat has proposed health and wellness centers in villages across India where yoga is also one of the components. So if we are able to successfully demonstrate that this works, then it can be pretty much taken up as an implementation model in Ayushman Bharat. So much related to my work. And now let's come to the second part of the presentation, and I'm kind of finishing this in next 5 to 7 minutes. So till now we talked about science of yoga, which is quite exciting. So we apply principles of science to modern postural yoga, very objective, measurable, repeatable, and in the domain of third-person observations. Now we also need to understand that yoga is not just that. Yoga is not just modern postural yoga. Yoga is very different, and science or the third-person perspective which the science takes, or of the objective worldview, is quite not same as the worldview or the paradigm of yoga. So we have to be comfortable with the fact that science and yoga are two different perspectives, are two different worldviews, are two different paradigms, and they cannot meet. So these are kind of these are the lines which probably are never going to meet. They are different, and it's essential to understand this difference. Otherwise, we may end up in confusing a whole lot more things. And why they're different? Because science is extremely materialistic. For science, what counts is only matter. So at the core of reality is matter and nothing else. So elements and atoms and subatomic particles, and that's it. Science considers consciousness, mind, and everything as some kind of a result of activity of matter. So matter is at the very core, and mind and all psychological phenomenon and consciousness emerges out of the matter at the core. While Indian knowledge systems generally take Advaita Vedanta, I mean, take Vedanta or take Sankhya or take Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, all the systems, at least Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta do not consider matter as primary. In fact, they consider consciousness as primary. So consciousness is primary, and matter kind of is just a part of the bigger consciousness. So these are, I think, these are the paradigms which cannot meet, and these are different paradigms, and we have to accept them as that. I'm sure you must have heard about this in the previous lectures as well, about the primacy of consciousness or the primacy of matter. So let's be very clear of that. Now I've put a picture of, I mean, when I represent consciousness, I've put some picture. It cannot be, consciousness cannot be represented by any picture, but I just put it, and the reason I'll just spell out in the next slide. So this is where we need to kind of use a different preposition. Science is one side, yoga is another side. So science and yoga, and there's no problem with that. We could do science of yoga. We can also think about science and yoga. So can yoga improve health? I'm asking the same question as I asked in the previous paradigm. So the first paradigm was kind of an Adi Bhautik paradigm. The second paradigm, the science and yoga paradigm, is more of a Adhyatmic paradigm. And again, what I'm saying this is based on my understanding of what Lokmanya Tilak has put in Gita Rahasya. That's a different topic. So I would kind of try to answer the same questions using this paradigm. So can yoga improve health? Now, here the health definition of health is different. Health is not all that what I described earlier. Here, health is basically, if you look at the etymology of word health, it comes from the word whole. So it's basically health is being whole or being one. So can yoga help you to achieve health? Of course. Of course, in this paradigm where it is kind of from an Adhyatmic paradigm, yoga, when it says tatha drashtu swarupe avasthanam, so when the drashta is in the swarupa sthiti, when that kaivalya is achieved, that is the state of health, that is the state of wholeness, that is the state of oneness with the universal consciousness, or the consciousness which is just all pervading. And that's how yoga can improve health, but in this paradigm. And let's have to separate from that the previous paradigm. So how yoga improves health? And for that, we need to really understand, again, the whole epistemology, the ontology, and the axiology is quite different in these paradigms. So we have to understand the model of the person from a yoga psychology point of view, or from Advaita point of view, basically Sankhya point of view. And here you can see the model of a person where it says that there is body, which is physical body, and there is consciousness, and the bridge between consciousness and body is your mind, or antakaran. Karan is instrument, anta is internal. So body is external, and there is antakaran, and antakaran has four components. So it's called antakaran chatushtaya. And these four components are mana, buddhi, ahankar, and chitta. And again, essentially there are three. It's buddhi, mana, buddhi, and ahankar. So mana is something which receives kind of all the information from jnanendriyas or sense organs, processes that information, and the way Brihadaranyaka Upanishad explains it as sankalpa vikalpatmak mana. So sankalpas and vikalpas occur, again, cannot explain it due to lack of time. But manas processes everything, and then it sends it to buddhi for taking a final decision of what to do or what not to do. So buddhi is kind of is an executive. It's not an executive. It's like the judge which decides whether one thing has to be done or not has to be done. So it's called as nishchayatmak buddhi, or if it's not nishchayatmak, then it is a baushaka. And there are various shlokas in Gita which talk about the different nature of buddhi. And ahankar is something which distinguishes myself with others. So this whole differentiation between me and others is through ahankara. And buddhi, ahankara, manas, and ahankara, they're all products of prakriti. And consciousness is beyond all this. Consciousness of the ultimate Atman is beyond the antakaran chatushtaya. But the bridge between the consciousness and the body is through the antakaran, which is manas, buddhi, and ahankara. In nutshell, what it says is that you are not your body. In this paradigm, basically, you are not your body. You are not even your mana. We kind of tend to feel that mana is like final thing, and then let's take care of mental health and things like that. Mana is just manas, or mana is only something which is a processor. It's a central processor. It receives inputs, sends it to buddhi. Buddhi finally takes the decision whether to do it or not. Whatever has to be done under the influence of ahankara, under the influence of your samskaras, your vasanas, and finally the manas executes everything through karmendriyas, or through motor organs. So Manas is just a central processing unit, but one of the most important ones, and it helps us to kind of really either get binded, attached to body, or get liberated or detached from the body, and uh, kind of get rested in consciousness. So what Patanjali does, or what is explained in Yoga Sutra, is how to kind of slowly remove your indriyas from their objects and get inwards and turn that focus of manas, buddhi, and kind of reduce that ahankara, and finally experience that consciousness, which is a first person experience, which cannot be tested by others. It's not something which can be measured by a third party. So it's a first person experience of kaivalya, and that's the reason why it cannot be in the realm of kind of science as we define it earlier. So the whole process is described as prati prasava, and the ashtanga, the 8 angas of yoga, are for how to kind of go back to its original form. The original form is consciousness. And if you want to know more about it, please buy this particular book, which is titled Psychology in the Indian Tradition by K. Ramakrishna Rao and Professor Anand Paranspe. Both of them have been stalwarts in this field. This is an extremely important, nice book, which can give you a whole lot of ideas about what this thing is. Again, we really kind of deal in only the physical world, where we think of body, at the most indriyas, and some aspects of mana and cognitive functions. We are never taught that there is something called the buddhi. Buddhi is where your agency lies, where your intention, your you can decide what to do or not to do, and you can sharpen your buddhi. Buddhi is not intellect. Buddhi is intellect, but it's not really the calculations and kind of logical functions. It's far beyond that. It is something which decides human life per se. And slowly on this path, when you start understanding the whole model, you do Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana, you kind of you understand this, and through Jnana Marga, you can achieve that you can realize that final consciousness and reality. Similarly, through Abhyas and Vairagya and Ashtanga Yoga Sadhana, Tapaswadhyaya, and Ishwar Pranidhar, which is described in Yoga Sutras, you can do that. Or you can do it through Nishkama Karma Yoga. Nishkama Karma Yoga is another way of doing it, or you can do it through Navavidha Bhakti. So there is a Bhakti Marga, Jnana Marga, Karma Marga, Yoga Marga. For most of us who are in this world with a lot of vasanas and with a lot of sanskaras, I think for us it's karma and bhakti, which is far easy and doable than jnana and yoga. But again, this is my personal view based on the gurus whom I have kind of listened to. Um, if you want to know more about this, Professor Paransky has very recently, just last month, has published this particular book, Understanding Yoga Psychology, and it gives in very detailed way how you can. I mean, what is this whole process of prati prasava, and how you can. There are 5 kleshas, and how one can get rid of each and every klesha based on the commentaries on Yoga Sutra. So he has presented in a very contemporary fashion, using the paradigms and the frameworks in the current psychology, as well as providing response from the yoga side. So do buy this book, very recently published one. And I think this brings me to the end of this particular talk, where I presented science of yoga and science and yoga. I hope that distinction is clear at the end of this presentation. There were questions. which Dr. Soham had sent it to me, and it was very helpful for me to structure my talk based on that. I'll quickly go through all these questions very quickly in a minute or so that I can just at least these questions are then not repeated. So first question was, can mental disorders be healed with meditation? Of course, yes. You have seen the evidence: depression, anxiety, substance use, perinatal mental health, adolescent mental health. Most of those, again, healing is a very big word. Healing is like curing. I don't think we can say that because it has not been tested. But mental disorders, you can reduce the severity of mental disorders. You can improve the functioning of people with mental disorders with meditation and with overall modern postural yoga. What are the plans to design and evaluate psychological and social interventions embedded in Indian thought with special focus on yoga? I think I presented my work. That is my plan at individual level. And I think similarly, there are hundreds of researchers across the world who are doing it. This is a very rich field, developing very rapidly, and one can be associated with it. How can a certified yoga instructor help in this endeavor? Certified yoga instructor is at the heart of most of these trials. So when I'm doing a trial, I'm not teaching yoga to pregnant women. It is the certified yoga instructor who with whom we decide what the yoga protocol would be. And yoga instructors are actually the ones who deliver the interventions. And beyond that, they can play a lot of important roles in designing the trials and evaluating the trials. How to tackle people with mild psychiatric disorders in your workplace team with yoga and meditation? So you never tackle people. Tackling is like controlling them, managing them. So tackle is not really the right word. But let's say how you help people with mild psychiatric disorders? I think I presented that in my slides, that there is a whole lot of evidence for modern postural yoga where you can improve reduce severity of psychiatric disorder, and not just mild, even for people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and severe mental disorders. Yoga as an adjunct therapy is helpful, and there are certain studies going on which are using yoga as a primary medication. Comment on Indic psychology. I think I did comment on Indic psychology. I've referred you to a book on Indic psychology. You can always refer to it. What are the ways through which yoga can help today's Gen Z? As we can see, the youngsters are going through depression and suicidal tendencies. So I would say that at two levels. Again, if you are you could be of any age actually, because age doesn't really matter. But let us say if you're in your 20s and 30s and going through a lot of stress, depression, and suicidal tendencies, I would suggest that, I mean, the best way is actually to take professional help, to reach out to, let us say, professionals in this field, psychologists, psychiatrists, and yoga therapists who are focusing on this particular area. You can also reach out to me on my email if you want, because I'm a psychiatrist. I understand psychology. I understand yoga research. You can reach out to me, no problem. How you can do that? So you can practice, again, you can practice modern postural yoga. It will definitely help in reducing those symptoms. But at the same time, start trying to understand Indic psychology, or in simple words, at least try to understand what Vedanta is, what are the basic principles of Vedanta, try to understand what Bhagavad Gita is. My go-to book or my go-to reference for this is, and again, I've been through all these years for last 20 years or so. Me and my father and some of my other close, even my grandmother, we have kind of, and even Professor Paranspe for that matter, our go-to source is a commentary on Bhagavad Gita by Lokmanya Tilak, Gita Rahasya. Gita Rahasya is our go-to book. You can, even Dr. Paranspe would say that that is his book because it was Gita Rahasya was presented to him by his father. So we are highly indebted to Lokmanya Tilak, who is not actually known for this work, but he has written this whole Gita Rahasya, which explains Vedanta concepts very nicely. It explains the whole model of person. And there are two critical concepts in this. To understand that you are not your body. Your body is important, of course. Your consciousness is important, but your consciousness is part of the universal consciousness. So once you understand this really in depth, then there is no suffering actually, because you are the universe. It's basically like you are part of the universe, or you are the universe. And once you understand that you are the universe, what you sort of realize is that there is something called as Sarva Bhutatmaikya Bhav, Sarva Bhutatmakata. So everything is in consciousness. Everywhere there is, you can see yourself everywhere. And once you see that, you start working for them. So there is Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata. So these are the two concepts from Bhagavad Gita, Adhyaya 6, Shlok number 29. You can refer to Sarva Bhutatmakata. And Sarva Bhuta Hite Rata is something there in the 12th Adhyaya. It's across many Adhyayas. But these are the two concepts which can help you in the very long run. In the short run, you can do modern posture yoga, you can consult professionals, and you can do something very physical that will also help. But in the long run, try to understand this paradigm of Vedanta and yoga as a means to achieve that particular end of suffering. Patanjali Yoga Sutra and therapeutic aspects. I think I'm not too qualified to kind of really talk on that, because Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are extremely deep. The Ashtanga which he has described are very deep, and I don't think we have that kind of an objective. I mean, it's used as a therapy, but quite in a limited fashion. Um, and we are still understanding the whole thing. I mean, there are people who are writing commentaries, and we are not yet got into the yoga. I mean, yoga as a chikitsa, yoga as in not modern postural yoga. Patanjali yoga as a chikitsa. So basically there are people or patients who kind of start on this path. So they start practicing Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Parigraha, Brahmacharya, Tapa, Shaucha, Santosha, Ishvara, Pranidhana. So they start practicing this, and then there is some kind of an outcome. I'm not aware of that kind of a research. Of course, there are people who are doing it, but most of the research or most of the objective work is in the field of modern postural yoga. Why there is lack of understanding and emphasis on mental health, and why it is not embedded in our society? It is an important question, maybe not directly related to our topic today, but in very short, I would just like to say that no, that's not the case. Uh, Indian society, at least for millennia, has been focusing on the fact that life is a suffering. In fact, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras also refer to life as a basically suffering. So anyone who kind of slowly realizes that all this raga dvesha are not really helpful, that person starts thinking about how to end this suffering forever. So suffering and mental health has been at the very core of Indian society's existence. Now we don't speak that language of depression and bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and things like that. And I do understand that most of the Indians are neither aware of Indian psychology nor aware of foreign psychology. So forget about that. I mean, I do agree with the fact that there is, in the current world, there is little emphasis on mental health as is defined in the modern way. Uh, but try to believe me that Indic thought is not. Indic thought is rich. It is predominantly mental health driven, and beyond that. I mean, it's not just mental health. It's the health in kind of toto. Okay. And the last question: explain the need to introduce yoga as a syllabus for doctors. Well, the best way to kill any subject is to introduce it as a syllabus. The moment you kind of put it as a mandatory syllabus, people start hating it. I I have learned it outside my more prescribed curriculum. I have learned many things outside the prescribed curriculum. So probably my personal view is that I don't know. You can, uh, but the doctors I know of, or medical students whom I know of, they are in a different world. They have a paradigm of their own. I don't think they will really like this whole thing. Of all the research work and projects undertaken so far, which work of yours inspired you the most? All, everything has inspired me, because there is scope to learn from everything. I very much enjoy science and yoga. I enjoy these two different paradigms as kind of different, but at the same time, I love doing science of yoga, which is basically application of scientific principles to modern yoga practice. I enjoy. I have worked in either both paradigms, and this has been pretty enriching for me all along. Thank you so much for patient listening. It's been more than 1 hour. Sorry for extending my time. Dhanyavada for your patient listening. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul Sinha. And it has been a very nice talk, though it was like 1 hour and so, but I think we covered the important aspects which we needed to present in at least one particular lecture. We had other lectures where we discussed some philosophical aspects and spiritual aspects also. But in one lecture we needed where we want to know the evidence-based knowledge that we have created around yoga to really validate and prove that yoga can be adopted as a therapeutic intervention, and people who practice yoga in their life are less likely, so we can have a confidence now that they are less likely to fall into such health issues, whether they be physical or they be mental. And probably it also gives whoever is the audience here and whoever will watch this lecture later on in YouTube, they will be inspired to take up yoga as a practice. And for that, there are many yoga instructors available. One should go to a like practitioner who is certified or is practicing for a long time. Many people are there who are not certified as such, but they are practitioners in their life. So one can consult them as well. And so these are the avenues in which one can start uh, like taking up yoga in their life. And as we discussed, other people also discuss paradigms of science and yoga, that also Dr. Rahul has beautifully described again. And we should aspire to pursue the worldview of yoga and try to experience that first-hand experience of the consciousness. So we should aspire in that direction in time. Maybe if someone is ready right now, then one can of course start doing that. But we should have that objective in mind. That is the final destination where we would like to reach someday. So I would open our inbox also for question and answer. So you can write down the question and answer in our Q&A box, or you can raise your hands for asking some of your questions. We have some time to take some questions. Before I, like Kumar has already raised his hand, but before I unmute Kumar, I would like pose a question which has come from YouTube. So it is saying that, is it true that if you start yoga practice in your 50s and 60s, the muscles, joints, etc. have already lost their flex, which cannot be undone? So effectively, yoga will help only if you start early in life. So that is, so what is your comment on that?
Well, very quickly, I would like to say that wherever you feel like starting, just start, because there's no need to worry. I mean, I'm just reminded of Bhagavad Gita 6th Adhyay, where Arjuna says that, "Arey, I mean, you have said so many things. How is it possible? Probably I'll die and then nothing will happen." So Krishna tells him that don't worry. Whatever you accumulate in this lifetime, you in the next lifetime it will come to you, and then you will start journey from there. So don't worry about that. But that is at a different plane. On physical plane, again, don't worry about the muscle flexibility and muscle stiffness, because yoga, even the modern posture yoga simply doesn't act through the muscular system. Most importantly, if you focus on pranayam, if you focus on meditation, if you focus on yoga nidra or shavasana, it will help you to improve your parasympathetic tone. I didn't go into the details of sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, because I think that was covered in some few previous lectures. But there is a huge role for parasympathetic nervous system activation, vagal afferent activation, and it has immense benefits in terms of improving your overall health, reducing your stress, improving the function of your hypothalamus pituitary axis, and so on and so forth. And by the way, yoga is not about, I mean, many a times we are given to believe that unless you are able to do this Mayurasana or you are able to do this complex asana, you are not really up to it. That's not the thing. What I have learned from one of the yoga researchers in Pune is that, and even in a way Patanjali kind of says that about asana, is that asana is relaxation in action. Relaxation in action. And that's like something very important for us to understand. Um, so it's not about your range of motion, your strength, flexibility. Do it. Start doing any form of modern postural yoga. Start reading about yoga sutras, or I would, for yoga sutras, I would say, I mean, when I started reading yoga sutras, I thought that it's beyond me. And then I moved to start understanding Vedanta first. So try to understand Vedanta first, because again, Vedanta is the theory, and the practical aspect of is basically Yoga Sutra. So you need to understand Vedanta, Sankhya, and Yoga as a combined thing. So best place is to start with Vedanta. So that's on more cognitive uh, side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answer. I will unmute Kumar now, who can ask his question. Kumar, you are unmuted.
You hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for a very interesting lecture. My question, I think you mentioned one thing about inflammatory marker and immunity. My question is related to the telomeres. How does yoga help in extending the length of the telomeres, and has any work been done in that particular area?
Excellent question, Kumar. Very relevant. And first of all, thank you so much for. I mean, I very briefly went through some of the previous lectures, and probably you are the person who always asks a question. So I was expecting a question from you, and thank you so much for engaging with all these presentations. Coming to your question, um, Elizabeth Blackburn had done this original work on telomere length and its association with longevity and things like that, for which she got a Nobel. Elizabeth Epel, EPEL last name, I think she is a researcher from the west coast of US, and she used mindfulness and similar contemplative practices to demonstrate that these practices, again, I'm not exactly sure of what practices they used, but this was also used by Dean Ornish in one of his studies. So Dean Ornish's group and Elizabeth Epel's group, they have done work on this, and they have kind of showed that mind body interventions, so yoga is kind of under the broader umbrella of mind body interventions, they do help in kind of improving, I mean, reducing the cellular level pathologies which lead to shortening of telomere length, which ultimately leads to cellular death and aging. So that's one. And recently, Patricia Kinser and her group from University of Virginia, she's also an excellent researcher in the field of perinatal mental health and application of yoga. They are using demethylation. So demethylation of DNA is their kind of they're doing assays to look at that. And then there are groups from AIMS, Dr. Lima Dada and others, who are, again, I'm not too familiar with their work, but they are also looking at some of these markers related to cellular aging and subcellular pathologies. So yes, there is again there is good amount of evidence building up on this. And if you are more interested in this pro-inflammatory markers, do visit this paper by Falkenberg. I think that's the last name. You can also directly write to me. I can send that paper. She has looked at kind of multiple pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory markers. Again, the evidence is not so very conclusive. Even I had done a small pilot study which was published a couple of months ago, and this was a trial where we looked at yoga and yoga in pregnant women and its impact on C-reactive protein. Now, C-reactive protein is a hopeless inflammatory marker anyway, but we didn't find any change in that. Anyway, we kind of added our bit to the evidence base. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
So as per, I had one question actually. So since we are in the topic of these papers and these articles, so you mentioned that there was a website where all these articles are listed. I didn't really catch that name.
Yoga Alliance. Yoga Alliance. I'll put it in the chat box because this is the one which is a US based website. I think Dr. Sadbir Singh Khalsa is someone who has really led to this. So Yoga Alliance website has all sorts of resources related to yoga.
Okay. So I see there are no further hands raised. And as Dr. Rahul has already told all of us that we can get in touch with him. So his email ID was also displayed in the first slide. He's probably also typing it down. Are you? Yeah. So his email ID is also there in the chat box. It's very simple, rahulshidhai@gmail.com. So you can get in touch with him if you have any further queries, and he already mentioned that he would be happy to get in touch and help you out. And I think there is one more question from YouTube probably. Are yoga mudras as effective as the normal yoga which one does? A question on yoga mudras.
Yes, well, sorry, I'm not too aware of the literature. I've not looked into the Yoga Mudra literature, but there are number of books and textbooks on Yoga Mudras. And I mean, one can actually have Yoga
As
Mudra as an intervention and look at the outcomes. I'm not
yeah.
aware of that. It's possible. It may be there.
So you have not come across any literature
No,
review
I have not.
also?
No, no, no. I've not looked into it. I have not come across means I've looked and I have not come across. But no, I have not looked into it because that's not my. I mean, that's not my current area of focus. So, but it's possible that there is some evidence around that.
Right. Kumar, do you have a follow-up question? I will unmute you then.
Yes, please. I have been fascinated by one thing, but I don't know how to even approach it. Is there a way to reprogram our mind? In fact, with our whole life, we accumulate lots of things and we want to get rid of all the negativity and so on. Is there a way we can reprogram our mind through meditation or some other means? And what are your thoughts on that?
That's Yoga Sutra. So that whole programming, that whole code is Yoga Sutras. Yoga Sutras are difficult to understand. So people have written bhashyas on it. So there is a Vyasa Bhashya, there is a Bhashya by Nagoji Bhatt. And then if that is also too much for us, then you can read this Understanding Yoga Psychology, because that is actually about reprogramming. What happens is, as a child, you start constructing reality, not just as a child. Through janmas we construct reality, so we have to deconstruct reality, and that's the whole process of prati prasava and how you deconstruct. I think it is, forget about practicing it. It is, I mean, for simple people like me, it is even so difficult to even understand after. I mean, I've spent almost 3-4 years working very closely with Professor Paranspe. I've done the index for that book, I've done proofreading for that book, but I have not really retained most of that stuff because it is so very dense and so very difficult. The whole prati prasava process, or the whole deconstruction of what you have kind of accumulated in your life, but it is there. And the good resource for you to go is Kaivalya Dham's, not no, sorry, not Kaivalya Dham, Krishnamachar's institute, the Yoga Research Institute by Guruji Krishnamachar. They have their website, and they have all the bhashas. The all the bhashas on Yoga Sutras. So I'm just forgetting the name of the website, but it is basically Krishnamachar's Chennai Institute has a website, and that website has all the bhashyas on Yoga Sutras. And by the way, the Indic Academy, if I'm not wrong, yes, Indic Academy has a YouTube channel, and there's one retired IPS officer who has learned the Shastras. I think Dr. Rao. He has very extensive videos on each of the Yoga Sutras. So he takes one sutra and has like 1-2 hours commentary on each of the sutras. So you can visit Indic Academy. And again, Kumar, feel free to drop me an email. I can share all these resources with you if you are interested. And just to kind of finally say this, you don't have to reprogram your mind. You have to get rid of your mind, because I mean, ultimately, mind is the problem. There are no solutions for the problems in the mind, and that's what the whole paradigm is. You get rid of the mind and you establish yourself in pure consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul. I think there are no further questions. And we would like to conclude our session now with a formal vote of thanks. So I would like to, at the very first, I would like to thank Dr. Rahul Sinha for accepting our invitation and adjusting his routine to make time for this lecture. The lecture have given a lot of takeaways to the audience. I'm very sure of that. And coming to the audience, we must extend our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to the overwhelming support that we have received from them. And our registration mark has already crossed 1350. And it was not possible that this lecture series could be conducted without your overwhelming support. We will thank our director, Professor K. Pant, and our Dean Academic Affairs, Professor Apurva Kumar Sharma, for lending their constant support to our efforts. We also thank Professor Anil Gaurishetty for his able leadership to the IKS Committee of IIT Roorkee and being a source of encouragement and enthusiasm for us all. We also thank the various IIT Roorkee authorities and offices who had always been available to solve our problems and extend their support in organizing this lecture series. And special thanks to all the IKS student volunteers who are doing all the background work, like conduction of the program, starting from email communications, managing email communications to setting up the webinar sessions, and also the beautiful invocation video that Raghudev has created. And apologies to anyone whom I may have missed, but our heartfelt thanks extends to one and all who came together and made this event a success. Thanking again to our esteemed speaker for sharing his knowledge and insights with us. Our next session will be on 18th August, next Friday, so for which communication will be sent in due time. Officially, we are ending this session with the Shanti Mantra recitation, for which Angelica is here. I ask Angelica to take over, and after that, we will end the session. Thank you.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति।
Thank you.